This week we have Ohad Finkelstein, founder and managing partner of Danley Capital, currently advisor to the CEO of Coca-Cola, the CEO of Walmart, an all-rounder, super influential individual in the telecom business. Ohad, for the listeners who don't know who Ohad is, would you love to give yourself an introduction?
Yes, hi. Let me start with the very beginning, or the very end, actually, in the last part of your comments, opening comments. I'm managing today Danley Capital, which is my family office. Danley Capital has several legs. One leg is consultancy, and as you were saying correctly, I am a consultant to the CEO of Walmart and some other boards, and has been consulting to big companies in the past. In order for me to consult a company, two conditions need to materialize. Condition number one is that the company will be in the Fortune 100 list, the global Fortune 100 list. Condition number two, that the company will be strategically challenged. And in that respect, I've been advising on short, mid, and long strategy and technology to some of the biggest corporations in the world. And people will think, well, why would they need somebody like me to consult? It's because people know, and CEOs know of big corporations, that if you want to survive, you need to change. Change is not mandatory because your survival is not a must. But if you want to survive, you must change. And unfortunately, they're all sitting and heading huge corporations with hundreds of thousands of people, employees. And it's a Queen Mary. To shift it to the left or to the right, it's a big, big task. And the market doesn't give them enough leeway to change and to steer the Queen Mary 2 degrees to the north, which will take the next 10 years. So some of those companies, and historically this was the case with companies that disappeared, like Sears and other, it's like the Roadrunner in the cartoons. All of a sudden you find yourself over the canyon and you're looking down and you don't know what to do. And so even in big organizations where change is very painful, change is needed and mandatory all the time. And this is part of the job description and targets of every CEO to make sure that they won't hit a wall at some point, because when they do, it's too late. So this is primarily what I do. I also I'm involved big time in cyber through a platform called Team8, which I was one of the early investors, and I'm sitting on the board of the group. It's a very interesting intuitive proposition to the common sense market today. It's doing exactly the opposite of what a normal VC will do. And I won't spend time right now explaining unless it's interesting, and you can ask me a question later, but people can go and look at team8.vc, team like TEAM, and 8, the number 8.vc, and see the proposition, the value proposition. I'm also involved in finance, both in the city in London and also in Frankfurt. I'm also involved in crypto. I'm a chairman of a crypto fund. I believe that crypto will come back when the world will come back, one way or the other, but it will come back. And so I invest a lot of my time in actually thinking about what is the next generation and how to do crypto in a way that will be meaningful to institutions, public, and regulators. And I do some other stuff. I sit on about 10, 12 more the different boards on 4 different continents. So it gives me the bird's eye view of what I can do and what trends coming up and how I can make things happen for different companies. And I sit on boards of tiny startups, which I enjoy very much, or bigger company boards. I started my career in the mid-'80s in the PC industry. And I joined a company called Packard Bell. At the time, Packard Bell was coming up in the market. Later, it became the number one, the biggest company to assembler of PCs in the world. I joined Packard Bell on the tech support team. And these were the days in the mid-'80s that people used to call the tech support and say, It says here in the instructions, press any key. I can't find any key. Where is the any key? Those were the days. I joined tech support, and very quickly, not understanding more or less a word about technology. I didn't grow up with a PC. The first time I saw a PC in my life was at UCLA, at the PC lab at UCLA in the mid-80s. I remember the first PC I saw was a monochrome screen, no hard drive, only floppy. But I actually felt that I had a rendezvous with destiny. And I felt that this machine, I couldn't even comprehend it into words, but what I felt was that this machine is looking at me and telling me I'm the future, and somehow you should need to stick to it and become part of this future. And I have to say that rendezvous set my career all the way till today. So when I look at today, where I am, I can actually trace it all the way back to that first, I saw it across a crowded room kind of experience. And I've been in Packard Bell until 1992. And Packard Bell in my days grew from tens of employees to 6,000-7,000 people. So at a very young age, in my mid-20s, I've learned a huge lesson that you cannot learn in any business school, no matter which and how good it is. I learned from firsthand experience what happened to a fast-growing company. The chaos, life in chaos. We were hiring like madmen. There was, we went one quarter, we grew from 700 to 1,300 employees. I didn't know, what's your name? Why are you sitting on my chair? Move over here. What are you doing? Who are you? Things are constantly changing, and the spiral is spinning faster and faster and faster and faster. The centrifuge. And you can see in situations like this, which are stressful from 7 o'clock in the morning when you enter the office until 9 p.m. when you leave the office, it's stress all the time, and changing stress. So you can't even get used to it or be prepared to it. You see immediately who can take responsibility, who has been spiraled out, who is pushed to the sideways, who takes center stage, who are the real leaders among people. And there are some surprises, some big disappointments. But the biggest, so that was one lesson, the life in chaos. How do you connect if you're successful? And that people don't think about it, but companies have the same amount of problems if they go north or south. It's two different sets of problems, but it's the same amount of problems. So when a company is doing well and it's growing like madmen, what do? How do you actually host this growth and make it happen rather than it burying you and pulling you into the grave? The second lesson I learned in Packard Bell was at some point I went to Orem, Utah to learn some stuff from the big companies. Orem, Utah in the 1980s was a very sleepy Mormon town in Utah, but was house to two giant companies at the time, WordPerfect and another infrastructure company called Novell. WordPerfect was before Windows, before Word, before Microsoft Office. WordPerfect was the company that dominated 98% of the word processing market. And I went to learn from them because we are just building our tech support and people starting calling and we didn't know what to do. And I went to Orem, Utah. They occupied at that time an former US World War II Air Force base. And there was a hangar, huge hangar, which they hosted the tech support associates. And they had at any given time about 6,000 tech support online 24/7. I've never seen something like this until then, of course, but never seen something like this since. There were viewing platforms with binoculars, which you can actually look and see, because as long as the eye could see you, I could see cubicle upon cubicles upon cubicles. And here comes the lesson I've learned, and at the same time, the biggest trauma of my professional career. 2 years later, they didn't exist. With all their might, with all their 6,000 tech support, they misread or didn't read the small letters on the wall, which was Windows, Windows, Windows. And when Windows load in the face, it was to damn late
Mm.
for them. So I saw firsthand a company that was sitting at the Olympus, not sitting at the Olympus, was the Olympus. And within 2 years, because they did not have the flexibility, because they were not, whatever the reason was, they disappeared completely from the map. So at a very young age, in a very early stage in my career, I learned those two lessons. One, how to live in chaos and how to excel in chaos and how to make chaos a tool for you to benefit from, not to be suffering from. And the second thing is that you always need to be flexible in your mind and massage the value proposition all the time, because the world in any segment, in any sector will change all the time. We're changing all the time. Even if the change is slow, all of a sudden you step for the new reality and you say, oh my God, where was I? Oh yes, I was backed into those discussions about. You don't want to be part of the world of yesterday. You want to be part of the world of today and tomorrow. And in order to do that, you need to be flexible. And you need to actually challenge yourself all the time, whether what you are your set of beliefs is still meaningful and vibrant.
Yeah. Well, Ohad, you have one of the most interesting and broad backgrounds that I've seen within the software space. I know, dating all the way back to kind of the start to mid 80s. I know in 1994 you joined a business called VocalTech, which IPO'd in 1996. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in 1992, my wife and I decided that we want to go back to live in Israel. And we moved back to Tel Aviv after many, many years in the United States. And I joined the founding team. I was not the founder, but I joined the founding team of a company called VocalTech. We invented voice over IP. And I've learned 2 lessons in VocalTech. One lesson was that a group of young kids, more or less, in the mid-20s, from an obscure town in Israel, north of Tel Aviv, can actually challenge and change a 100-year-old business model. So that's a kind of a message to every young entrepreneur that may be listening to us. Yes, you can. No matter how small you are, no matter how meaningless you are, no matter how you are a fly on the wall and nobody doesn't even bother to try and kill you, you can actually change the business model. You have to understand that until voice over IP and until streaming and until what we have today, we're using Zoom. The telecom industry was 100 years old since Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in the 1880s, I think. And it was based on the one business model. The longer you speak and the more you speak, the more I dig into your pocket. That's all there was to it, right? So if you talk between Manchester and London, it's one fee. If you talk between Manchester or London and New York, it's a much better fee, a bigger fee for me. And I want to encourage you to talk more and more and more because I get more money for it. We came to Deutsche Telekom in 1994 or 5 and presented, and the conversation went something like this. Let me tell you about something that you didn't know exists until yesterday. And let me tell you why you shouldn't sleep well at night, even though until yesterday night you slept very well without knowing about this. And I looked at them and said, look, there will be a time when I will sit in my home in Tel Aviv and you will sit in your home in Bonn or Berlin, and I will pay fees to my internet service provider, local fees, and you will pay local fees to your internet service provider, and we will have an international call that will cost us paying local money and local distance. And there was quiet in the room. And then I said, generation 1. Generation 2, it will be on your network without you even knowing that it was on your network, and it was going to be completely free. So the meeting, there was quiet in the room, and I was sitting there with 2 other people that used to work for me. And the head of the meeting, which I won't mention his name, looked at me and said, Ohad Finkelstein, do you want to tell me that you are, and he had his glasses in mid-nose, you are going to change the 100 years old business model of telephony, which is based on time and destination? And I said, yeah, you just nailed it on the head. And there was quiet in the room, and somebody pushed a bottle of water and said, would you like a glass of water before you leave? And the meeting was over. I've never been in a situation. Later, he told me that he was so shocked that it dawned on him that this is the biggest risk for the future of the company. And they ended up investing in our company and being part of our story, which suggests also agility and being flexible and saying, okay, I don't know why even, but I have to be part of this because this is going to actually affect my future. And so this was a lesson for life, that you can dare to dare. That's which brings me to a completely different subject, because when you dare to dare, you need to ask yourself 3 questions, or 2 or 3 questions. One, you have to embrace masochism. You have to be a masochist, because you're going to be, if you decide that you have a vision and you want to go and test it and fund it, you will have so many rejections, so many slaps on your cheek, and then on the other cheek. You will be raw meat by the time you're done, and you still, even with all those kind of negative response of why not to do it, you're crazy, you can't do it. How can you go and charge the telephony model, business model? How do you the big AT&T or British Telecom? They don't know what you know. Really, are you serious? Yes, they don't. And so, if you embrace rejection, if you like rejection, if you like to be slapped in the faces, a masochism kind of, and after all those rejections, you can still stand up and say, this is why I really want to do it, and this is why I am going to do it, then go and do it. Else don't get into the race, because this race is completely heartbreaking to most, because even if you start somehow and you'll be funded, this is the beginning of the journey, and nobody promises you that you will get to the happy end of the story, meaning you will be bought by another company as an M&A, or you'll be acquired, or you'll be going public as an IPO, because this is only the beginning of the journey, and most, like 90% and more, I'm just putting a finger in the wind, the cases will end up not happy ending, with a happy end chapter. So you need to be ready all the time. You need to be agile, you need to be mind flexible. When I look at young entrepreneurs that comes to my office for advice, or if I'm thinking about investing in them, the first thing I'm looking for is to understand their mind flexibility. Do they have flexibility? Can they touch, standing up, can they touch the floor with their fingers, that kind of flexibility that you want to see. And when people come to me for the first meeting, usually they go out shocked, because I speak on everything that they didn't plan to speak. I'm not interested in your value proposition in the first meeting. I'm interested to see what kind of a person are you, how flexible you are, how intuitive you are. Can you go with some different ideas? I'm not asking you to open your laptop and give me a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation about your value proposition. This will be later, but I want to understand who you are, and there are very good reasons why. Today, in the high-tech market, from an idea to an exit, it's the average of 10 years. It's a lifetime, 10 years. Average of 10, it can be 8, but it can be 12 as well. So if I'm going to invest in you, or I'm going to help you, and we're going to be together in the next 10 years, I might as well, before I get into it, understand that I can actually enjoy being with you for the next 10 years, enjoying doing things with you. There will be ups and downs. That's, the next 10 years on every company, in every vertical, no matter which vertical we're talking about, whether it's biotech, AI, finance, crypto, doesn't really matter. The world is going to change many times in ways that we can imagine, ways that we can't even begin to imagine. And I want to understand that you are capable of embracing those changes and embracing those events, because 10 years, and that you understand my sense of humor, or I understand your sense of humor. There are things that we know that there'll be tough times, but let's make the best out of those tough times. And let's not forget a sense of humor. We can solve problems. So for me, when I'm looking at young people, I'm saying, you need to look yourself in the mirror and not lie to yourself and understand what are your strengths and weaknesses. And when you have strength, keep them. When you have weaknesses, bring people to support you that are better than you in those areas and can help you. Don't be afraid of bringing smarter people than you are. Don't be afraid to actually think about the investment and say, you know what? We started a company when the world went due east, and now the world is going due west, and we need to rethink and restart the whole thing. Easy said than done, because people have put money on one direction, and now you have to say to them, remember the money? Forget it. We're going this way. That's never easy. But I want to understand, and I want to see the guts that people has to actually stand in front of the investors and say it, or also convincing an investor. And in that respect, there's one more point. Gaining a new customer, gaining a new deal, gaining a new investment is not a knockout game. I've never seen anybody, even I think in Facebook in the early days, it wasn't a sure thing, or Google, and people didn't put, it wasn't a knockout investment round. It's a point game. And if you to win a customer or to win a new deal, it's you win by points. And if you win by points, then 1 point is good enough to take you over the hurdle, over the fence, or keep you on not getting over the fence. And so you need to make sure that all your dots and all your tick in the box are good when you come to speak to an investor or when you come to speak to a new customer, because only one, which you never know which one, was the one that actually helped you go over the fence. And that part is extremely important, because I think that a lot of people neglect some of the things that are comfortable for an investor to think about, or for a customer, like, do you have the company? Do the company have a website? Does the company has a board? Does the company have a chairperson? What is the management? Why are they not showing the management on the website sometimes? And all those kind of things. And then the last but not least of all, I want to understand your ego. Because everybody has an ego. You have an ego, I have an ego. The question is not if we have an ego, but if we have an ego problem. And I want to work with people that have an ego, meaning they know what they're worth, but don't have an ego problem, because it will come to bite in the next 10 years that you and I are going to spend together.
That's super, super interesting. I think it's advice and insight that a lot of founders, CEOs find super, super interesting and extremely valuable. I guess on the flip side, as a CEO, as a founder, as a young entrepreneur, old entrepreneur, looking to secure investment, what do you think a founder or a CEO should be looking for when they're looking at partnering with investors? We speak to so many young, hungry entrepreneurs that have so many different ideas, but also so many different opportunities to gain investment from many different avenues. What do you think someone should be looking at as their criteria for choosing an investor?
So, right. So the last few words in your sentence was, I don't know if you meant them, but this is worth having an issue with. You said actually gaining an investor. In today's world, not only I interview you, you interview me as an investor, as a young startupist, right? It's not about I'm sitting over the bucket of money and you come dancing and do the chicken funky dance on the table. That's not the case. You're also interviewing me, again, because it's a 10 years on average period, and we want to actually at least enjoy some of it together. But what I do and what I did in my startups as an entrepreneur, I always looked at the end game of the story, try to figure out, like a book, what is the happy ending chapter? How does it look? And set that as a goal. And then go back and re-engineer and try and write a story that will lead to this happy ending. And for example, some practical advices rather than just theoretical. When I see a company with a new value proposition, I don't like to see the presentation. I saw so many PowerPoint presentations in my life, more than I can count, or I wish to count. I want to see 2 slides in the presentation. Slide number 2 and the one before the last. Slide number 1 is the company name. You called it any way you wanted. That's okay. Fait accompli, whatever it is. Slide number 2, I want to have the slide, which I title as the glimmer of greatness. The glimmer of greatness. What is the glimmer of greatness? Summarize for me, articulate it for me in 1 paragraph. This is not a Saturday afternoon exercise. This is you need to think about every word. Articulate for me the value proposition, the greatness of the value proposition, the glimmer of greatness. Mind you, I said greatness. I didn't say goodness, niceness, betterness, most of the sameness. What is the greatness of your company? If you can, we will continue. If you can't, and I'm not really excited, then don't waste my time or your time. We'll part as friends, but this is not for us to continue going together forward. If you did, then don't go to, I don't want to talk about your value proposition yet, because I'm sure that you know it, and I'm not going to catch you on a typo. This is not interesting for me. Jump over the entire presentation to the slide before the last. The last one should be thank you, and a lot of people forget to put it. So I recommend to people to, after coming and spending time with anyone, say thank you at the very end. But the slide before the last is what I call the competitive exit landscape analysis. I repeat, the competitive exit landscape analysis. Even though it's 10 years down the road and it's finger in the wind, and the world will change so many times, we know. Tell me as an investor, show me that you think about me. And so if you have a company or a new company and a new proposition, the way to do it is the following. It's few simple steps. Step number 1, think about who can actually buy you. We're all going to build $1 billion companies, and we're all going to go in IPO. But as they say in United, in the unlikely event that you land on a body of water, you should have this slide that's saying who can actually buy you and why. And don't do 10 companies, 3, 4. You will never get to the 5th one. Once you identify the companies that can actually buy you, acquire you, go to the next level and do a quick, swift analysis, a SWOT analysis on them, and understand their strengths and weaknesses from far. Then, once you did this, do another dive and say, what can I do in the developing of my product to make me more attractive to help them, if in the case, in the future, maybe to buy me. And what do you do when you do this process? Let's say that I'm an investor now. You showed me that you know where you place in the constellation, meaning which companies are around you. You showed me that you know their weaknesses and strengths. You show me that you have a plan, because you as an entrepreneur and a CEO of the company, the founder and the CEO, has your first priority, that there be no mistake, is making shareholder value increase. That's having the company have money, and then have the company have a mission and a vision. But the number 1 is to increase shareholder value. You want to tell me how from every dollar I put in your company, I will get 5x, 10x, 1x, whatever the x is. So what you showed me is that you are comfortable in the constellation. You know your place among the stars. You know who potentially can buy you. You know their weakness and strength. Therefore, you know what to put the temptation pills in the product to help or not to do. Sometimes you say, okay, they develop something that if it's the unlikely event that they will decide to buy us, they won't buy us because they have something which we're doing, but they're doing it much better. So maybe I shouldn't develop this. And that go down to your bottom line and saying, I'll save money. I'll take the money that I wanted to develop and put it in a different feature. And that will be a winning point for me. So you juggle many balls as a CEO, as a founder of a company, and always remain optimistic. Always remain optimistic. And if you do it and you go all the way to an IPO or an exit via an M&A, the journey is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And different from one company to the other. I've been involved in my life I don't know how many companies, 40, 50, 60, I don't know. But the journey is always unique to each company. Every CEO or founder is different. I want to add one more point. I don't know how much time we have, but I think that one of the things that is being very neglected by entrepreneurs is the composition of the board. And during the bubble days, the bubble burst, before the bubble burst in 1999, 2000, 2001, board didn't matter because the life expectancy of a company before an IPO or M&A was a year. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was a very short journey. Today, when the journey is 10 years on average, boards can break and make a company. And there are two kinds of board members and two types of board members. The two types are those who have been CEOs and have not been CEOs. I can identify from 1,000 kilometers away somebody who was not a CEO, didn't sit in the driver's seat or the ejection seat. Somebody who was a CEO who feels the guillotine all the time above his neck. Every 90 days, the guillotine goes down. You need to make sure that you at least have an inch to continue breathing until the next quarter. It's a different feeling than somebody who was number two, right? So those are the two types. The two kinds, it has to do with board philosophy. The ones that actually believe that the board is here to serve the company, and the ones that believe that the board is here to be served by the company. And so you need to have your board members, if you have your board members from the that have been CEOs, that can understand what you're going through, and believe that they are here to help you, not you to serve them, overall you'll be better off. But boards are very important today in today's governance, in the value proposition, the people you choose, and in those boards you will have investors that are board members, but you should always think about the independent board member. You need to bring somebody as a board member from the outside that has not invested in the company. Therefore, he doesn't have a built-in conflict of interest. He's not a shareholder and a director. He's only a director, and he's been remunerated by the company in a very clean way, by equity. So if the company will be sold, if you give somebody 1% of the company and the company will be sold for 100 million, that person will make $1 million in equity. If the company will be sold for 200, he'll make $2 million in equity. Simple, clean, no conflict of interest. And that person, if that person knows how to operate in boards and gain the respect of the other board members, become the Supreme Court justice that helped in many crises to providing letters to bring everybody down from the trees that they climbed, that they didn't have to climb to begin with. And that's crucial. And it's crucial because the length of the journey.
That's super interesting and so valuable as well. And I guess something that's quite relatable to the current kind of macroeconomic climate as well. And as we're talking on the topic of CEOs, what advice would you give to CEOs in today's climate where there's so much uncertainty, where money's difficult to raise, where we're seeing so many big businesses lay off thousands of employees, and being able to stay comfortable or warm in that uncomfortable environment? What would you say to the CEOs in that environment?
So, well, we can't really dress it any other way. We are living in difficult times or interesting times. I think that the crisis that we are experiencing now is by far more deep and bigger than the global meltdown in 2008 and 2009. The main difference, the major two differences between the 2009, the global meltdown, and this crisis is that during 2008, 2009, the governments worldwide poured billions of dollars into the market to keep the market afloat. Today, not only that the government do not support and do not throw money into the market, except two esoteric examples, one with Silicon Valley Bank and one in Switzerland, which is really nothing, peanuts. Money is being taken away from you because we have inflation. So this global crisis is accumulation of several things. And the most important one is that we are coming after 35 years of economy that was never there, before. If the big economists, the Nobelists, Myriad Keynes and John Adams and Adam Smith, sorry, and Milton Friedman would have resurrected from the grave, they wouldn't understand how the world operated for 35 years. It's a lifetime. It's not a bubble. It's a lifetime without inflation, interest rate, or unemployment. And so this came to abrupt end, and it came to abrupt end not because of financial reasons. It came to abrupt end because three factors that are not financial, and that's also a major difference between this crisis and the global meltdown. From light to heavy, the post-corona syndrome, and we see it in many directions. This is not about putting the mask on your face or not. This is about looming in the horizon is the next crisis, which related to the post-corona, with all the real estate business rentals. Half the buildings in London, the office buildings, half the buildings in Singapore, half the buildings in Sydney, Australia, in Tel Aviv, or in San Francisco are empty. So this is the new post-corona syndrome crisis that we're going to face. The second is the trade war between China and the US. And the third, of course, the Holy Grail, is the war in Europe and Ukraine. And so we are living in an area which has huge amount of uncertainty and instability. And that's exactly what the market hates. And as long as those three problems will not be resolved, then we are not going to see a huge, short of a miracle, right? Something will happen in the war in Ukraine, something will happen in Russia. All of a sudden, there'll be an agreement, something. But as long as we don't have those big events to change the mood, the crisis is not going to go. So you as a CEO need to think about a 2 years time. 2023, I'm afraid to say, is not going to be any year that you and I or anybody else would really like to remember. It will go into the 2022, the same trash with 2022 and some of 2021. And the big question is 2024. And I'm not that optimistic, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm not that optimistic that Q1 2024 all of a sudden will be different than Q4 2023. And so we need to think about long haul. Now, here's the good news. I went back and studied every major financial crisis that I've been going through in my career, starting with the saving and loan crisis in the US in the mid-80s, where it was a prime kind of crisis. Nobody took note, and 20 years later, it came back to bite us big time. All those crises, the banking, the saving and loan crisis, 9/11, the bubble burst, the global meltdown, were purely financial crises. And for purely financial crises, we can use purely financial tools. And each one of them took about a year to a year and a half, between 12 to 18 months to recuperate, recover, fix it, and the market flow and never look back. This is a different kind of crisis. But I also went back to all the crises all the way back to 1875. When I looked at all the corporations that incorporated in the last quarter of the 19th century, from Maytag to Johnson & Johnson to Kodak to Coca-Cola to AT&T, the list goes on and on. And then if you jump into the 1930s and the Big Depression, the Great Depression, it's the same, HP and so on and so forth. There's so many companies, United Airways, Polaroid, and heck, look, Google and Facebook are a product of the bubble burst in 2001. So I would actually want to say, in the positive point, this is the time to invest, because money is suppressed, because valuations are suppressed, because everything is now, the party is over. This is the time that 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, we'll see the new great companies that came out of the ashes of this crisis. However, the public at this point is not really happy. There was in the 1960s, Harold Wilson was running for prime ministership in the elections, and his slogan was, "We never had it so good," more or less. And this was 20 years after World War II, and Britain finished paying the debts to the United States, and so on and so forth. We never had it so good. He won. A year later, he was interviewed by Frost, which was a very famous BBC interviewer, the Walter Cronkite of the UK, and he said, "Mr. Prime Minister, do you really think that this is we never had it so good?" And you see, he didn't answer immediately. He was puffing his pipe and finally said, you know what? Yes, we never had it so good, yet nobody's happy. And this is exactly the situation today. We never had it so good in terms of longevity, medicine, medical care, the whole thing, technology. But yet nobody's happy because financial crises and economy is not about statistics and numbers. It's about a mood and it's about psychology. And right now, the public is not in a good mood. Worldwide, we have inflation. We're battling inflation. We are keeping it under control, but inflation is a very dangerous kind of cancer. We have a lot of challenges, but it's market sentiments, and market sentiments, by definition, will change. And we have bull market, and we have bear market, and we have in between. And now things are a little bit hard. But I think I'm actually extremely positive and extremely optimistic for the future. It will change. There is still a lot of money looking to be invested. Right now, people are not in investing mode. It's very hard to invest, and I hear a lot. I hear a lot of companies that didn't receive any term sheets, and by the time they receive it, they are not good, and they're actually horrible term sheets. And I didn't really. Sometimes you hear about somebody that was able to gain some money and actually had a successful round, but the general rule is that it's not. However, if you believe in this is my probably ending points, unless you have other questions. For every entrepreneur out there that actually wants to do something, please, please, please don't give up. This is your dream. This is the dream this is your story. Even if you fail in actually doing it, it's better than not knowing that you failed. And then you go to the next one. The big difference in societies that embraces entrepreneurship and not is not the fact that we embrace entrepreneurship, it's the fact that we embrace failure, that we accept failure. And you can fail once, you can fail twice, but you can succeed the third time. So Humpty Dumpty, don't, stand up immediately and get yourself a lot of advice around you. And don't be scared from the journey. The journey is fascinating, always.
Yeah, well, on the Hubscale podcast, we always end with the same question, and it's, if you had to go to the beginning of your career again, Ohad, what would you tell yourself?
What would I tell myself at 25, or 24? I don't get vertigo. And so I can look over the abyss and without vertigo. That gives you sometimes a false sense of confidence, and I fell on my nose several times because of it. And I would tell myself then to listen more to myself now with all the experience and go perhaps a slightly different way to get the same result. Overall, I'm extremely happy with what I've achieved. The best thing about being in my position in the industry of technology, for whatever that means, is that you don't have to retire. There is no mandatory age where you have to retire. And you always work with young people, so that it keeps me young. I'm not as old as I look. And it keeps me connected and relevant. And that's a great, great thing to have at any age, in any industry. But some industries, you're a teacher, there's a pension age and you have to comply. Here you don't. You can continue as long as the entrepreneurs will think that you are valuable and relevant, and as long as you keep yourself relevant. The reason why I'm in this industry, it's in a way my way to cheat the Almighty. I have a glimpse of the future. I know a little bit about how the future is going to look like in cyber, in smart cars, in bio, in different, and that's what keeps me going. This is the adrenaline it's going back to my early days. I knew that computers are going to, I felt that computers are going to change history, right? Those kind of things. And I was right. So it gives me the sense to live a little bit into the future and scratch the curtain, open the veil a little bit, and have a look.
That's interesting. Well, Ohad, I really, really appreciate your time today. Like I said, I think the listeners will find this story super interesting. Yeah, loved having you on. Look forward to seeing the future of what Teammate and Danley Capital can achieve. And yeah, let's see what happens in 2024. Optimism is key, I guess.
Optimism is key. Yes.
Cheers, Ohad.
Thank you, Elliott.